What's going on, everybody? Good morning. We are just a couple days removed from the NFL Combine wrapping up, and it's time to start putting the finishing touches on how we all feel about it. We've seen everything we need to see, we've heard everything we need to hear. Now it's time to put the final pieces of the big board together and figure out what the team is going to do. So I got a couple videos that are planned to come out later today, where I'm going to talk about some of the guys that got my attention as a Seahawks fan. But who got the attention of the Seattle Seahawks at the Combine? Which players did the right things to get the attention of Pete and John? We may not know until the draft actually gets here, but what we can do for now is take a look at who the Seahawks met with during the Combine. So understand that this is not an exhaustive list. Understand that there are probably a lot of other players we met with, and understand that just because we met with a player doesn't mean that we liked what we saw. Doesn't mean that we now want to get that player. In some cases, you meet with a player and you really don't like what you saw, I guess. Or the other way, it goes the other way. Maybe the player doesn't like what he sees, as apparently Sauce Gardner did when he met with Carroll last year at the Combine. I don't know. But we're all hearing about that now, so certainly sometimes these meetings don't go great. But it is informative to see who the team visited with during that process. So wanted to make a video here to go over the Seahawks visits at the Combine. And that's also going to become a little more interesting in the coming days, because if you go on over to the NFL calendar over here on the NFL website, you can see that a handful of things are going to start populating in the coming days that are going to also help give us an idea of what players and what types of players a team is coveting. So I want to go over this real quick here. So yesterday, a few things happened. First is college pro days have started. Basically, players who did not do all their drills at the Combine, or just maybe they did the Combine but want to do this anyway, are going to have the opportunity to showcase their skills at their colleges, and scouts can go watch. So for instance, a player like a Tyree Wilson, who didn't really do anything at the Combine, he needs to prove that he is the kind of player that people are thinking that he is when they talk about him as a top 10 pick. So a guy like a Tyree Wilson, who could not go at the Combine, is going to probably try to use his pro day to prove that he's that good. So over the next couple of months here, we're going to see a bunch of different pro days populate across the country. So if there were any players who you didn't see enough of at the Combine and you want to get an idea of what they can do, like maybe CJ Stroud will run a 40 at the Ohio State Pro Day. Maybe Will Levis will run his 40 at the Kentucky Pro Day. Guys like Myles Murphy need to do something at their pro days because they didn't do anything at the Combine. And like I said, Tyree Wilson was like that too. Jalen Carter was somebody who didn't do very much at the Combine. So some of these players like to do their workouts at their pro days. Now, unfortunately, when players do their workouts at a pro day, they get to control the process much more, which means the results are often questionable. The 40 times are not, they're not fake, but sometimes they're not real, you know? Sometimes they're done by hand, sometimes they're done in a very imprecise way. So sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes you know that a player didn't do stuff at the Combine and did it at the pro day instead because he knows he'll be able to make sure things are favorable to him. But sometimes it's the best you got. You got to combine all this stuff with the tape of them playing football in college and come to a conclusion about these players. We also have facility visits. Clubs are permitted 30 non-local players for physical exams and visits. Now, there aren't going to be any on-field workouts for these things, but over the next approximately 5 weeks leading up into the draft, 5-6 weeks, you're going to be able to visit with players. And the players that you have visiting, the players that you have into your facility, that's going to indicate who you're interested in, even if you're not doing on-field workouts. Maybe you already decided you like that player. So that officially started yesterday. And we also yesterday had video and telephone interviews with draft-eligible players start. 3 video or telephone interviews per player, no longer than 1 hour in length. So basically, through the grapevine, we're going to hear about certain players visiting the VMAC. We're going to hear about Seahawks scouts attending certain pro days. We might even hear about these video and telephone interviews. From that, we'll be able to gauge who the team is looking at, who the team might be coveting, and we'll have a good idea of who the team is actually targeting leading into that late April draft. So that's a pretty significant set of events. I haven't heard too much of this happen yet, but it just started yesterday. I'm sure in the coming few weeks we're going to start to hear a lot about this stuff. So I'm going to keep my ear to the ground, try to get an idea of the players and at least teams we're looking at. All right, so that being said, the players that the Seahawks met with during the combine process include Dian Henley, which, hey, that's a big one. That's a big one for a lot of people. I like him. A lot of people like him. I think he's exactly the kind of player we need. Keely Ringo, I'm not over the moon about Ringo at this point in time, but certainly worth meeting with, especially at this point when it looks like he's going to be a second-round pick. J.L. Skinner, second coming of Cam Chancellor. If we go back to the 4-3 under defense, he's a great pick to be like the next Cam Chancellor. And for a team that is probably looking to move on from Jamal Adams soon, like next year maybe, makes sense to go after a big-time strong safety prospect. Mike Morris, a guy who kind of bombed the combine, but nevertheless, there are some intriguing things about him. I don't want to base a player entirely on his combine performance. And my boy Julius Brents. This guy, he almost had too good of a combine because now you're not going to be able to draft him, but it makes all the sense in the world that the Seahawks are looking at him. Makes all the sense in the world that he would fit their prototype for a cornerback. The next day we met with Michael Wilson, a receiver from Stanford who I mentioned is having a pretty good combine. He did a lot of bench presses. He's a bigger guy. Seems like he's going to be a really good blocker at the very least at the NFL level. And has some receiver upside as well. Pretty reasonable visit, sensible. Somebody who you're going to be able to get in the later rounds, potentially. The next day, we met with John Michael Schmitz, still the best center in this draft, even though I didn't love his combine. I think he disappointed, and I think he squandered his chance to maybe be worthy of a first-round pick. But still the best center in this draft. Makes all the sense in the world. Zach Charbonnet. I like Charbonnet a lot. Big fan. Definitely the kind of running back that we need right now. So I love the fact that we visited him. And the one that everyone's talking about right now, Anthony Richardson. We did meet with him, and Anthony Richardson has already said the meeting went really well. I really like that team. I felt a great vibe from Pete. Anthony Richardson basically said, I would love to be a Seahawk. And that's all that I could find for sure. However, I did hear, I cannot confirm this, but it is my understanding that we also met with C.J. Stroud and Zay Flowers. Stroud, of course, being one of the top QBs in this draft. Zay Flowers being a potential second-round receiver who had a okay combine. I would say a good combine in the stuff that really matters. So that makes sense as well. And yeah, those were the notable pre-draft visits for the Seahawks during the combine process. Now, as for the potential visits, all I have right now is this. Not much. Siaki Ika is supposedly in Seattle. I saw this from a couple different sources, but we don't know why. So that's all we have right now. It's not a whole lot, but, you know, it's something. All right. Hopefully we get stuff more concrete in the near future, but, yeah, that's who we visited with so far. That's who we seem to be interested in. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Go Hawks.